The council chamber was quiet as Ambassador Velnus stood before the communication device. His hands were shaking. His people were dying, and no one was coming to help them. The Varaxan horde had destroyed 47 colonies already. Now they were at the home world, ready to finish what they started. Velnus pressed the button one last time. His voice went out across the galaxy, traveling through space to reach anyone who would listen. "This is our final message," he said quietly. "The Varaxan have broken through our defenses. They kill everyone. They take no prisoners. Our military is scattered. Our cities are burning. We need help. We need warriors who can fight. Please, if anyone can hear this, we are begging for aid." The message traveled to hundreds of worlds. Most species heard it and turned away. The Varaxan were known across the galaxy as unstoppable killers. They moved like a plague, consuming everything in their path. To fight them was to die. No one wanted to risk their own people for a lost cause. But the message reached one small planet far out on the edge of known space. A blue and green world that the Galactic Council had only recently discovered. A world that survey teams had marked with a special warning in their reports. They called it a Class 12 Deathworld. They called it Earth. Commander Jake Henderson was standing on the bridge of the ESS Valiant when the message came through. He was a solid man with short brown hair and tired eyes. He had seen too much fighting during the wars that unified Earth. Now he commanded humanity's first ship capable of traveling between the stars. The ship's computer translated the alien message into English. Jake listened to the desperation in the ambassador's voice. He listened to the plea for help. He made his decision in seconds. Set course for the Cathara home system, Jake ordered his crew. "Maximum speed. We leave immediately." Lieutenant Maya Torres turned from her station. She looked worried. "Sir, we don't know what we're going into. The message said they've lost dozens of colonies. Whatever is attacking them must be incredibly powerful." Jack nodded. He understood her concern. "I heard the message, Maya. Someone is calling for help, and we're close enough to respond. Besides, it's time the galaxy learned something about humans. When we hear a call for aid, we answer." The Valiant's engines came to life with a deep rumble. Space bent around the ship as it jumped into faster-than-light travel. Inside were 300 human soldiers, pilots, engineers, and crew members. None of them truly understood that they were about to change how the entire galaxy saw their species down in the cargo bay. Sergeant Lisa Grant was checking her squad's equipment. She was lean and tough, with red hair pulled back tight. She had fought in the Mars Rebellion years ago. Her soldiers moved around her with practiced efficiency, loading their weapons and checking their armor. "Listen to me," Lisa called out to her troops. "We don't know what we're walking into, but the information we have says we're facing enemies that have destroyed an entire civilization. Stay alert. Watch your areas. Remember everything you learned in training. We're going to be the first humans most of these aliens ever see. Let's make a good impression." Private Danny Wolf swallowed hard. He was barely 20 years old and fresh out of basic training. He checked his rifle for the third time, his hands nervous. Next to him, Corporal Amy Chen gave him a reassuring pat on the shoulder. She was a farm girl from Montana who had joined the military to see the stars. "First mission is always rough," Amy said with a small smile. "Stick close to me. We'll get through this together." The Valiant raced through space, crossing distances that would have taken the Kitharam months. Human faster-than-light technology was new and rough compared to the elegant systems of older civilizations, but it was fast. Very fast. As they got closer to the Kithara system, the ship's sensors started painting a terrible picture. There were debris fields where orbital stations used to be. Sections of the beautiful ring cities around the planet were dark and broken, leaking air into space. And everywhere, like a swarm of angry insects, were the Varaxan ships. "Dear God," whispered Lieutenant Kyle Patterson from his station. "There must be thousands of them." Jake studied the display with calm eyes. The Varaxan vessels looked organic, like they had been grown instead of built. They were covered in sharp angles and bristling with weapons. They moved in groups, working together to tear apart what remained of the Kithara's defenses. "Open a communication channel to the planet," Jake ordered. Let them know help has arrived. And I want tactical reports from all departments. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. The communications officer worked to establish contact. Jake allowed himself one moment of doubt. They were one ship against an entire armada. By any logical calculation, this was suicide, but humans had never been good at logic. When someone needed their help, the view screen flickered and Ambassador Velnus appeared. His crystalline features were cracked with stress and exhaustion. Behind him, the elegant towers of the capital city were on fire, sending black smoke into the pale sky. "Unknown vessel, you should not have come," Velnus said. The ship's computer translated his words into English. "The Voroxan will destroy you like they destroyed us. Save yourselves. Run while you still can." Jake leaned forward in his command chair. His expression was hard and determined. "Ambassador, my name is Commander Jake Henderson of the Earth Space Service. We received your distress call. We're here to help. Tell me about your current situation." Velnus's eyes went wide. Hope and confusion crossed his face. "Earth, the death world. But your species just learned how to travel faster than light. You have one ship. The Voroxan have thousands." "This is insane." Probably, Jake agreed with a tight smile. "But we're here anyway. Now tell me about these Voroxan. How do they fight? What are their weaknesses?" For the next 10 minutes, Velnus explained everything the Cathara had learned through bitter experience. The Voroxan were a hive-minded species. They valued only strength and conquest. They overwhelmed their enemies through sheer numbers. Their ships were mobile assault platforms that deployed thousands of warrior drones. They showed no mercy. They had no interest in talking or negotiating. They had overrun 47 Cathara colonies in 6 months. Now they were at the homeworld for the final attack. "Their command ships are the key," Velnus explained. He highlighted several larger vessels on the tactical display. "Destroy those, and the smaller ships lose their coordination. But the command ships are heavily protected by shields and surrounded by their swarm. No single vessel can reach them." Jake nodded slowly. A plan was forming in his mind. "Ambassador, I need you to evacuate as many civilians as possible to underground shelters. Get your remaining military to form defensive positions at these coordinates." He transmitted a set of locations. "And get ready for quite a show." He closed the communication channel and turned to his crew. "Maya, give me firing solutions on the nearest Voroxan command ship. Kyle, I want our fighters ready to launch. Lisa, get your Marines ready for boarding operations, sir." Maya questioned. "We're actually going to engage them?" "Absolutely," Jake replied. His voice was firm. "It's time these bugs learned why Earth got classified as a death world." The Valiant dove into the battle like a hammer striking an anvil. Human railguns, designed to punch through the thick armor of warships during Earth's naval conflicts, opened fire at distances the Voroxan didn't think were possible. Tungsten slugs moving at incredible speeds tore through Voroxan vessels like they were made of paper. The kinetic energy alone caused massive damage. The Voroxan swarm had been systematically destroying the last Cathara orbital stations. Now they turned their attention to this new threat. Hundreds of ships peeled away from their targets and descended on the Valiant like angry hornets. "Launch fighters," Jake commanded. The Valiant's launch bays opened, and 40 aerospace fighters screamed into space. These weren't the elegant craft of more advanced civilizations. Human fighters were blunt and aggressive, built for one single purpose: killing the enemy. Lieutenant Commander Ben Hayes led the fighter wing. His call sign was Razor, earned through years of combat over Earth's oceans. He whooped with excitement as his fighter's engines pushed him back into his seat. The G-forces would have killed most galactic species. For humans, it was barely uncomfortable. "Razor flight, form up on me," Ben called over the communication net. "Let's show these bugs how Earth does dogfighting." The human fighter slashed through the Voroxan swarm with shocking aggression. Where other species pilots tried to avoid damage and preserve their valuable craft, human pilots flew like they didn't care if they lived or died. They made attack runs that brought them within meters of enemy vessels. Ensign Kate Morrison had the call sign Wildcat. She rolled her fighter upside down and dove beneath a Vraxan cruiser. Her cannons chewed through its belly armor. She ignored the proximity alarms screaming in her cockpit. She was focused entirely on the target.
Got one,
Kate announced as the Vraxan ship exploded. Who's next? But for every Vraxan ship they destroyed, 3 more seemed to appear. The Valiant's shields began to weaken under concentrated fire. Jake knew they couldn't keep this up for long. Time to show them our secret weapon, he muttered. Lisa, you're up. Target that command ship. Your team has 10 minutes to capture it and turn it against the enemy. The assault pod slammed into the Vraxan command ship's hull with tremendous force. The impact would have shattered the bones of most galactic species. The humans inside merely grunted as their armor absorbed the shock. Breaching charges exploded outward, melting through the alien metal. The Marines poured into the vessel. What they found inside was a nightmare made real. The interior of the Vraxan ship was alive. The walls pulsed like they were breathing. Organic matter covered every surface. The air was thick and heavy with strange chemicals meant to coordinate the hive mind. And everywhere there were Vraxan warriors. Each one stood over 2 meters tall, covered in armor that looked like insect shells, wielding weapons that were part of their own bodies. The aliens expected their environment to slow down and confuse any invaders. Instead, they found themselves facing creatures who had evolved in places. It's even more hostile than this. Lisa's rifle cracked loudly in the confined space. High-velocity rounds designed to pierce armor punched through the Vraxan warriors with brutal efficiency. Her team moved through the ship like they had trained for this their entire lives. Because on Earth, they had. Urban combat in ruined cities. Tunnel fighting in asteroid mines. Boarding actions against pirate vessels in the belt. This was just another mission. Clear left, Amy shouted. Her shotgun boomed in the narrow corridor. A Vraxan warrior stumbled backward, its chest shattered. Danny finished it with a burst from his rifle. The young Marine's hands were steady now. His training had taken over. There was no time for fear, only action. They fought their way toward the command center, leaving a trail of dead Vraxan behind them. When they finally reached the ship's brain, a massive pulsing organ the size of a car, Lisa didn't hesitate. Demo team, wire this thing for remote operation. We're taking this ship home. As the Marines worked, the Vraxan ship systems began responding to human control. The neural interface technology humanity had developed for their own computer systems proved adaptable enough to hijack the biological controls. Valiant. This is Grant, Lisa transmitted. Package secured. What are your orders? Jake's response was immediate. Turn every weapon on that ship toward the next command vessel and fire. Let's see how they like fighting themselves. The hijacked Vraxan command ship opened fire on its former allies. Its powerful plasma weapons carved through shields and armor like they were nothing. The Vraxan swarm suddenly received conflicting orders from their hive mind and descended into chaos. And in that chaos, humanity struck like the predators they were. The battle for the Cathara homeworld raged for 3 days. By the end, the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. On the surface, Vraxan ground forces had been pushing toward the last major Cathara city when human dropships began landing. Captain Scott Fisher led the ground assault. His company of mechanized infantry deployed in a defensive formation that the Cathara military analysts found completely baffling. They're setting up positions in an open Area 1, Cathara commander observed in disbelief. They'll be slaughtered out there. But what the Cathara didn't understand was that humans didn't see open ground the same way. Where the fragile Cathara needed cover and protection, humans saw clear fields of fire and tactical advantages. Scott stood on top of his command vehicle. Looking through binoculars as the Vraxan horde approached, there were thousands of them. A living wave of shells and rage. Behind him, his soldiers prepared their weapons with calm professionalism. Range 2,000 meters, called out Sergeant Pete Morgan. His voice was steady and calm. Wind is minimal. Temperature is good. Scott lowered his binoculars and smiled. Ladies and gentlemen, let's show them why predators hunt in packs. All units open fire. The human battle line erupted in devastating fire. Machine guns, descendants of weapons refined over centuries of Earth's conflicts, it sent streams of bullets into the advancing Vroxen. Artillery pieces positioned on high ground rained precision. Guided missiles onto the densest groups of enemy forces, but it was the individual soldiers that truly shocked the observers. Each human marine carried enough firepower to take on an entire squad of Vroxen warriors, and they used it with deadly skill. They advanced under fire, moving in coordinated teams that covered and supported each other with a smoothness born of instinct as much as training. Private First Class. Nicole Crane took a Vroxen plasma blast to her chest armor. The impact spun her around and knocked her down. She rolled with it, came up firing, and dropped 2 warriors before taking cover behind a wrecked vehicle. Her armor was scorched black. Her ribs were bruised. But she was smiling. "Is that all you've got?" she yelled. The Vroxen couldn't understand her words, but they understood the tone well enough. This prey was fighting back, and it was enjoying the fight. In orbit, the space battle had turned into a brutal slugging match. The Valiant had been joined by captured Vroxen command ships, now crewed by rapidly trained human operators. They brought a chaotic creativity to the vessels that the original owners had never imagined. Lieutenant Gary Webb had been transferred from the engineering corps to pilot one of the captured ships. He treated it like the hot rod car he had built as a teenager back in Texas. He pushed the biological engines past their safety limits. He made weapons systems fire in sequences they weren't designed for. He treated the alien vessel with the same respectful irreverence humans showed all their machines. "Oh, come on, baby," Gary muttered. He rerouted power from life support. After all, humans could handle lower oxygen levels better than most species. He sent that power to the forward weapons. "Let's see what you can really do." The modified Vroxen ship tore through enemy formations with reckless abandon. It took damage that should have disabled it, but somehow stayed in the fight through sheer human stubbornness and improvised engineering. Then a transmission came from the surface that changed everything. "Valiant, this is Captain Fisher." Scott's voice came through, tight with effort. "We've captured a Vroxen landing site and recovered their communication logs. Sending you the data now." Maya reviewed the information at her station. Her eyes went wide. "Commander, the Vroxen have a central hive ship 3 systems away. It's coordinating the entire invasion fleet. If we could take it out..." Jake nodded. "It would cut the head off the snake. But we can't leave the Cathara defenseless. We don't have enough forces to split our attention." It was Sergeant Lisa Grant who provided the solution. She transmitted from the captured command ship she had converted into a forward operating base. "Sir, what if we don't split our forces? What if we take the fight to them and trust the Cathara to hold their own world?" "They've been losing for months," Maya objected. "How can they hold without us?" "Because we've already changed the game," Lisa replied. "We've shown them the Vroxen can be beaten. We've proven that aggressive action works. And most importantly, we've given them captured Vroxen ships and weapons. The Cathara aren't weak. They just needed to remember how to fight." Jake thought about this for a long moment. Then he made his decision. "Ambassador Valnus, are you receiving this?" The Cathara appeared on screen. He looked far more composed than he had 3 days ago. Behind him, the capital city still burned in places, but the defense forces had stabilized their lines. "We are Commander Henderson. We're going after the Vroxen hive ship," Jake explained. "But that means leaving you with only minimal support. Can your people hold?" Vilnius was silent for a moment. His crystalline features reflected the light of fires and hope in equal measure. 3 days ago, I would have said no. But 3 days ago, I did not know what it meant to fight alongside Deathworlders. My people have learned from yours, Commander. We will hold. Go and strike at the heart of this plague." Jake nodded with respect. "We'll leave you to capture command ships and a company of Marines as advisors." "Give them hell, Ambassador," "We will," Vilnius promised. "And Commander, when this is over, I hope you will allow us to properly thank you. You came when no one else would. You risked everything for strangers. That is not something my people will forget." The Valiant and its small fleet of captured vessels prepared to jump into faster-than-light travel. They left behind a changed Cathera world. The aliens watched as the humans who stayed behind, 100 Marines, led by Captain Scott Fisher, began training their forces in human-style tactics. "Your formations are too rigid," Scott explained to a Cathera commander named Telos. He used a holographic display to show his point. "You're thinking like prey, looking for places to hide. Think like a predator instead. Where can you ambush them? How can you use their aggression against them?" Telos studied the display with new understanding. "We have always sought to minimize casualties to preserve life at all costs. But the Vraxen exploit this weakness. They know we will hesitate. They know we will pull back to save our people. Sometimes the best way to save lives is to end the fight quickly," Scott said. "Overwhelming force applied precisely. Make them afraid to engage you. Make them realize that attacking you costs more than they're willing to pay." As the Valiant jumped toward the Vraxen home system, those left behind put these lessons into practice. The Vraxen forces that had been pressing their advantage suddenly found themselves facing a transformed enemy. The Cathara used their intimate knowledge of their homeworld's terrain to set ambushes. The Vraxen home system was a nightmare made real. 3 dark planets orbited a dying red sun. Their surfaces were covered in organic structures that pulsed with terrible life. The hive ship itself was a monster. It was the size of a small moon, grown rather than built. Its surface was covered in weapons that had evolved over millions of years of conquest, Jake said, studying the tactical display on his screen. "We've certainly bitten off more than we can chew this time. Not the first time," Maya replied with a slight smile. "Remember the Mars Rebellion? Everyone said we couldn't take Olympus City. We did it anyway." "We lost a lot of good people taking that city," Jake reminded her. His voice was somber and quiet. "And we'll honor them by finishing what we started," Maya said firmly. "Sir, those colonists on Cathera, they're someone's children, someone's parents. We didn't come all this way to turn back now." Jake looked around his bridge at the men and women who had followed him across the galaxy. They were battered and exhausted. They were running on stimulants and sheer determination. And every single one of them was ready to see this through to the end. "All right then," Jake said, straightening in his command chair. "Let's kill us a hive ship. Maya, I want the captured command vessels to jump in first and draw their fire. We'll follow 5 seconds behind and target their primary weapons clusters. Ben, your fighters need to run interference. Keep their strike craft off our backs. Lisa, I need your Marines ready to exploit any breach we create." "Copy that," came the acknowledgments from across the ship. The plan was insane. They were 3 ships against a mobile fortress and its defensive fleet. By every rational calculation, they should die within minutes of engaging. But humans had a saying that was about to be tested to its fullest. Fortune favors the bold. The captured Vraxen ships jumped in first. Their human crews pushed the vessels beyond their biological limits. Gary Webb's ship, which the crew had nicknamed Lucky Strike, immediately came under fire from dozens of Vraxen vessels. "Shields at 60%, called out his co-pilot, a former Marine named Frank Porter. 50%. 40%. "Keep us steady," Gary replied. His hands moved across the organic controls he had learned to manipulate through trial and error. The Valiant needs a clear shot at that hive ship. When the Valiant emerged from its jump, it came in fast and low. It used the captured ships as cover. Jake's timing was perfect. The hive ship's weapons were tracking the more obvious threats, leaving a narrow window of vulnerability. "Fire," Jake commanded, the Valiant's main railgun. Designed to crack planetary fortifications, fired at maximum power, the tungsten round crossed the distance in a heartbeat and punched through the hive ship's organic armor. It created a breach 100 meters wide. But the hive ship didn't die easily. It immediately began regenerating. Its living structure flowed like water to seal the wound. Worse, it launched thousands of strike craft. The swarm was so dense it looked like a black cloud. "Razor flight. You're up," Ben transmitted, leading his fighters into that impossible swarm. "Remember, these things think with a hive mind. Confuse them. Make them think you're in 3 places at once. The human pilots dove into combat with a ferocity the Vraxen had never encountered. Where their previous opponents had fought defensively, trying to survive, humans fought like they were personally offended by the Vraxen's existence. Kate Morrison rolled her fighter through a gap in the swarm that shouldn't have existed. Her cannons blazed continuously. A Vraxen strike craft exploded, then another, then another. She didn't slow down. She didn't hesitate. She just kept moving and shooting with the muscle memory of thousands of hours in simulation and dozens of real combat missions. Cat, you've got 3 on your tail, Ben warned over the communication net. Only 3? Kate replied, sounding almost disappointed. She pulled her fighter into a vertical climb that stressed her pressure suit to its limits. Then she cut engines and rotated, letting momentum carry her backward as she fired on her pursuers. All 3 Varaxan craft disintegrated under her guns. That's boring. On the Valiant's bridge, Maya was coordinating the captured ship's fire patterns. She was trying to create overlapping fields that would prevent the hive ship from focusing on any single target. It was like conducting a symphony, except every missed note meant someone died. Lucky Strike is taking heavy damage, she reported. Hull breaches on multiple decks. Tell them to fall back, Jake ordered. Negative. Gary's voice came through, strained but determined. We can hold position. Just keep shooting that big, ugly thing. The Valiant fired again and again. Each shot punched through the hive ship's regenerating armor. But it wasn't enough. The massive vessel was simply too large, too resilient. Commander, we're not doing enough damage fast enough, Kyle reported from Tactical. At this rate, we'll run out of ammunition before we kill it. Jake knew he was right. They needed a different approach. Lisa, how fast can your team board that thing? There was a pause. Then Lisa's voice came through, filled with dark amusement. Sir, are you asking what I think you're asking? We can't kill it from the outside, Jake explained. But maybe we can kill it from the inside. Take your team and find that thing's brain. And Lisa, make it hurt. In the Marine Bay, Lisa was already putting on her combat suit. Her team had taken casualties during the previous fighting. They were down to just 20 Marines. But every single one of them was a veteran of the brutal combat of the past week. We're going hunting, Lisa announced to her squad. We're going to board that hive ship, find its control center, and tear it apart from the inside. Questions. Danny Wolf raised his hand slightly. The young private had grown a lot in the past few days. Sergeant, is this a suicide mission? Lisa thought about this for a moment. Then she nodded honestly. Probably. Anyone want to sit this one out? Not a single Marine moved. Not one backed away. Damn right, Lisa said with fierce pride in her voice. We're Deathworlders, people. Let's show them what that means. The assault pod launched from the Valiant, protected by an escort of fighters that cleared a path through the swarm. It punched through the hive ship's hull at the breach the railgun had created. It drove deep into the vessel's interior before the Marines deployed. What they found inside was beyond description. It was a living nightmare of organic corridors that pulsed and breathed. Walls oozed strange fluids. The air was thick with spores designed to paralyze or poison invaders. It would have killed most species within minutes. But humans had evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them. Their immune systems, strengthened by millions of years of fighting diseases and toxins, barely registered the Vraxan bioweapons. The spores that should have paralyzed them merely made them cough. Gas masks on, Lisa ordered, more out of caution than real necessity. Stay tight. Pete, you've got point. Amy, watch our rear. They moved through the hive ship like ghosts. They used their helmet sensors to map the organic structure. The Varaxan warriors they encountered learned too late that humans were ambush predators when they wanted to be, capable of absolute stillness followed by explosive violence. Danny, the kid who had been terrified just days ago, had become something else entirely. He moved with the group like he had been doing this for years. His rifle was an extension of his will. He dropped targets with precision shots before they even knew the humans were there. They fought their way deeper into the ship. They followed the thickest nerve bundles toward what could only be the hive ship's command center. When they finally breached into that chamber, they found themselves facing the Viraxan Queen. She was massive, part biological computer and part living weapon. She was beautiful in a terrible way. Her shell gleamed with bioluminescence. Her mind radiated a psychic pressure that would have crushed the will of lesser species. Lisa felt that pressure. She felt the Queen trying to dominate her mind, to make her submit and kneel. And she laughed. "Sorry, Your Majesty," Lisa said, raising her rifle. "But humans don't kneel. Marines, light her up." The final battle was brief and brutal. The Queen fought with every weapon at her disposal. Psychic attacks that tried to break their minds. Bioplasma that melted armor. Warrior drones that poured into the chamber by the dozens. But she had never faced creatures quite like humans before. Beings who could shrug off psychic domination through sheer, bloody-minded stubbornness. Amy took a direct hit from bioplasma. It burned through her left arm armor. She screamed in pain but didn't stop firing. She dropped to one knee and kept shooting with her good arm. Pete threw a grenade that exploded against the Queen's carapace. Danny and 3 others concentrated their fire on the wound it created, pouring round after round into the breach. Lisa moved forward through the chaos. She dodged plasma blasts and leaping drones. She got close enough to plant charges directly on the Queen's central nerve cluster. "Fire in the hole!" she shouted, diving for cover. The explosion was massive. It tore through the Queen's body, severing connections and destroying organs. The massive creature let out a psychic scream that echoed across the system. Then she collapsed, her body twitching in its final death spasms, and across the entire system. Every Viraxan vessel suddenly went dark. The hive mind was severed. Without the Queen's guidance, the Viraxan were nothing but mindless drones. The aftermath of the battle was perhaps more profound than the battle itself. News of humanity's victory spread across the Galactic Council at the speed of light. It was carried by automated beacons and stunned observers who had witnessed the impossible. The humans. The species from the Deathworld that most civilizations had dismissed as barbaric newcomers had done what no one else could. They had broken the Viraxan horde. Jake stood in the council chambers 2 weeks later. His dress uniform was crisp, despite the long journey from Cathara space. Around him, representatives from 300 species watched in silence as Ambassador Velnus addressed the assembly. "For 6 months, we called for aid," the Cathara ambassador said. His voice carried across the vast hall. "We sent our pleas to every allied system, to every species we had treaties with, to everyone we thought might help, and we were met with silence. The galaxy had decided we were already lost." He paused, letting that truth sink in. Then came Earth. 1 ship. 300 souls from a world so dangerous that our survey teams recommended against extended contact. They heard our call, and they came. Velnus turned to Jake. His crystalline features reflected profound gratitude. Commander Henderson and his crew did not come because they had something to gain. They came because someone needed help. In doing so, they did not just save the Cathara. They reminded the galaxy what it means to answer a call for aid. The council erupted in discussion. Some species were grateful. Others were wary and suspicious. The idea that humanity, aggressive and warlike humanity, might become a major galactic power was unsettling to civilizations that had grown comfortable in their long peace. The council speaker, an ancient being from a species that had forgotten war millennia ago, raised a limb for silence. "Commander Henderson, the council recognizes your service to the Cathara Collective. But we must also address the concerning nature of your species' capabilities. Your tactics were ruthless. The casualties you inflicted were extreme. Some here fear what humanity might become if given free rein among the stars." Jake had expected this response. He took a breath and stepped forward. "Council Speaker, with respect, you're asking the wrong question. You shouldn't fear what we might become. You should be grateful for what we already are." Murmurs rippled through the chamber like waves. "Explain," the speaker demanded. "Earth didn't make us warriors because we love violence," Jake said. His voice carried conviction and strength. It made us warriors because we had to be to survive. Every species here evolved to fit their environment. You, he gestured to a representative from a peaceful garden world, evolved to be cooperative and diplomatic because that's what your world rewarded. We evolved to be tough and aggressive because anything less meant extinction. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of dozens of alien species. But here's what you need to understand. The same instincts that make us dangerous to our enemies make us loyal to our friends. The same aggression that lets us fight also drives us to protect. The same stubbornness that makes us refuse to back down makes us refuse to abandon those who call for help. Jake pointed to the display showing footage from the battle. Yes, we were ruthless with the Viraxen, because they were a threat not just to the Kythera, but to every peaceful species in the galaxy. You want to know what humanity will become? We'll become what we've always been. The ones who show up when everyone else has given up. The ones who fight the battles that need fighting. The ones who stand between the darkness and those who can't stand alone. The council chamber fell silent as Jake's words settled over them like a blanket. Finally, Ambassador Velnus spoke again. If I may add something, Council Speaker. In the 2 weeks since the battle ended, human advisors have been training Kythera military forces. They have taught us not just how to fight, but how to think about defense differently. Because of them, we are stronger than we have ever been. They did not seek to conquer or control us. They taught us and then prepared to leave. Other species began to speak up. Those who had studied the battle recordings more carefully added their observations. The Delary representative noted humanity's willingness to take casualties to protect Cathara civilians. The Hexer analyst highlighted how human tactics, while aggressive, were also remarkably precise, minimizing collateral damage. The Lorthy observer pointed out that humans had captured Vraxen vessels intact, preserving technology and biological samples that would help the galaxy defend against future threats. Slowly, the narrative shifted. Fear gave way to cautious respect, then to something more. The council speaker finally raised a limb again. Commander Henderson, the council has discussed your species' application for full membership. In light of recent events, we are prepared to grant Earth's provisional membership status. This will give humanity access to galactic trade routes, scientific exchanges, and diplomatic protections. However, there are conditions. Jake nodded. He had expected conditions. What are they? First, Earth must establish a formal military structure that can coordinate with Council defense forces. Second, humanity must accept Council observers to ensure your military development remains within acceptable parameters. Third, you must agree to submit to Council jurisdiction in matters of interstellar law. The third condition was problematic. Earth had just achieved faster-than-light travel. They were still figuring out their own government structures for space colonization. Submitting to alien laws seemed premature. Council Speaker, I'm not authorized to accept those terms on behalf of Earth, Jake said honestly. I'm a military officer, not a diplomat. I can bring your offer back to my government, but the decision isn't mine to make. The speaker seemed to appreciate this honesty. That is acceptable. We will dispatch a formal delegation to Earth to begin negotiations. In the meantime, Commander, you and your crew are granted diplomatic immunity and freedom of movement within Council space. Another voice spoke up. It belonged to a species Jake didn't recognize. The alien was tall and thin, with skin that shimmered like oil on water. Council Speaker, if I may, I am Trade Minister Xanthi of the Corvin Commonwealth. I wish to extend an invitation to Commander Henderson and his crew. The Corvin would be honored to host them while diplomatic negotiations proceed. We have much to discuss regarding potential trade agreements.
More voices joined in.
Representatives from a dozen species offered invitations, trade proposals, requests for military training programs. It seemed everyone suddenly wanted to be humanity's friend. Jake felt overwhelmed. A week ago, they had been fighting for their lives. Now they were being courted by alien civilizations. I appreciate all the offers, he said carefully. But right now, my crew needs rest. We've been in combat operations for 2 weeks straight. If the Council will excuse us, We'd like to return to the Cathara system to recover and regroup. The speaker nodded in understanding. Of course, the council recognizes your service and your sacrifice. You are dismissed with our gratitude. As Jake left the council chambers, Ambassador Velnus walked beside him. That went better than I expected, the Kithara said quietly. Did it? Jake replied. Half of them are afraid of us. The other half wants to use us. Welcome to galactic politics, Velnus said, with what might have been a smile. But you have allies now, Commander. The Cathara will stand with Earth, always. You saved us when no one else would. That creates a bond that cannot be broken. Jake nodded gratefully. Thank you, Ambassador. We'll need friends in the days ahead. Back on the Valiant, the crew was celebrating in the mess hall. Someone had broken out the emergency alcohol rations. Music played from portable speakers. Marines and pilots who had been trying to kill each other in training exercises a month ago now shared drinks and stories. Lisa sat with her remaining squad members. Amy's arm was in a regeneration sleeve, but she was smiling. Danny looked older somehow, the boyish fear replaced with quiet confidence. Pete was telling an embellished story about the final assault on the Queen. Ben and Kate were engaged in a heated debate about who had shot down more enemy fighters. Neither could prove their claims, so it devolved into friendly insults and laughter. Maya found Jake standing alone on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. You should be down there celebrating with them, she said. I will, Jake replied. I just needed a moment. We lost 37 people, Maya. 37 men and women who followed me into hell. It saved millions, Maya reminded him gently. Maybe billions, if the Varaxin had kept spreading. Those 37 died as heroes. They died doing something that mattered. Jake nodded slowly. I know, but it still hurts. Should, Maya said. The day it stops hurting is the day we become the monsters the Council fears we might be. Come on, sir. Your crew wants to toast their commander. Don't make them drink alone. Jake allowed himself a small smile. All right. Let's go join them. As they walked toward the mess hall, Jake thought about the future. Earth was about to enter the galactic stage in a big way. There would be challenges ahead. Politics to navigate. Treaties to negotiate. Possibly more wars to fight. But for tonight, they had one. They had saved an entire civilization. They had proven that humanity belonged among the stars. And most importantly, they had shown the galaxy what it meant to answer a call for aid. 3 months had passed since the battle that broke the Vraxin horde. The galaxy was still adjusting to the reality of humanity's presence. And humanity was adjusting to being part of something much larger than themselves. Jake stood on the bridge of the Valiant as it approached Earth orbit. It felt strange to be coming home after everything that had happened. The blue and green planet looked exactly the same as when they had left. But Jake and his crew were completely different people now. Earth Control is hailing us, Maya announced from her station. They're requesting permission to broadcast our arrival on all major networks.
Ow.
He had hoped to slip in quietly, but he should have known better. Grant permission. Let them have their show. As the Valiant descended toward the spaceport in Geneva, Jake could see crowds gathering. Thousands of people lined the streets. Banners and flags waved in the wind. When the ship finally touched down, the roar of the crowd was audible even through the hull. Ben said from his station. I guess we're famous now. I hate being famous, Lisa muttered over the communication channel. Can we just skip the parade and go home? Afraid not, Sergeant, Jake replied with a slight smile. We represent humanity now. We have to play the part. The crew disembarked to a hero's welcome. Politicians gave speeches. Military bands played stirring music. Medals were awarded. Jake accepted his with quiet dignity, thinking of the 37 crew members who would never receive theirs. But it was during the private memorial service, held the next day, that Jake finally felt he could breathe. The families of the fallen had been invited. Jake spoke to each one personally, telling them how their loved ones had died, how they had been brave, how they had made a difference. Private Danny Wolf's mother hugged Jake tightly. Thank you for bringing my boy home, she whispered. Danny had survived, but 22-year-old Corporal Helen Price had not. Her parents stood nearby. tears running down their faces as they accepted her posthumous medal. After the ceremony, Jake was summoned to a meeting with Earth's newly formed Space Council. The council consisted of representatives from every major nation and space colony. They had been formed specifically to handle humanity's entrance onto the galactic stage. Commander Henderson, the council chairperson, began. She was an older woman named Margaret Okonkwo from the African Union. We've reviewed the Galactic Council's offer of provisional membership. We have concerns, as do I, Jake admitted, particularly about submitting to their legal jurisdiction. We barely understand their laws. Exactly, Margaret agreed. But we also can't ignore the opportunities. Access to their trade networks alone would advance our technology by decades. Their scientific databases contain knowledge we can't even imagine. Another council member, a man named Chen Wei from the Asian Coalition, spoke up. There's also the matter of defense. The Viraxan were not the only hostile species in the galaxy. We've received intelligence reports about at least 4 other aggressive civilizations. We need allies. And apparently, everyone wants to be our ally now, added Maria Santos from the South American Federation. We've received trade proposals from 67 different species, military training requests from a dozen more. One species even offered us an entire star system in exchange for protection. Ouch. Jake raised his eyebrows. An entire star system? The Pelthans, Margaret explained. Their territory borders what used to be Viraxan space. They're terrified another horde might emerge. They want human military bases in their system as a deterrent. That's a huge commitment, Jake said carefully. We barely have enough ships to patrol our own solar system. Which is why we're accelerating the shipbuilding program, Chen Wei replied. The Cathara have shared their manufacturing technology with us as thanks for saving them. Combined with our own innovations, we can have 10 ships like the Valiant operational within a year. 50 within 5 years. Jake felt overwhelmed. Everything was moving so fast. 3 months ago, humanity had 1 deep space vessel. Now they were planning a fleet. Commander, we need your recommendation, Margaret said. You've dealt with these aliens. You've seen how galactic politics work. Should we accept the Council's terms? Jake thought carefully before answering. Accept provisional membership, but negotiate hard on the legal jurisdiction. We should agree to follow their laws in their territory, but maintain sovereignty in human-controlled space. As for the military coordination, that's actually a good thing. We can learn from their experience while teaching them our tactics. And for God's sake, don't accept that Pelthan offer unless we're absolutely certain we can defend them. The council members nodded, making notes. What about you, Commander? Maria asked. The council has requested you specifically as Earth's military liaison. You'd be stationed at the Galactic Council headquarters, coordinating joint operations and training programs. Jake hadn't expected that. What about my crew? The Valiant. The Valiant will receive a complete refit with the new technology, Chen Wei explained. Your crew will be given the choice to continue serving under a new commander or transfer to other positions. Many of them are being requested as instructors at the new Space Force Academy. And if I refuse the liaison position, Jake asked. Margaret smiled slightly. Then we find someone else. You've done enough, Commander. More than enough. If you want to retire and write your memoirs, you've earned that right. Jake looked out the window at the Earth below. Somewhere down there, Lisa was visiting her family's farm. Ben was probably at a bar telling exaggerated stories. Danny was reconnecting with friends who couldn't possibly understand what he'd been through. They had all earned their rest. But Jake knew the galaxy wouldn't rest. There would be more threats. More civilizations calling for help, and humanity was now in a position to answer those calls. I'll take the liaison position, Jake said finally. But on one condition. I want my senior staff to come with me. Maya, Kyle, and anyone else who volunteers. We work well together. The council should get the whole package. Done, Margaret agreed immediately. We'll make the arrangements. 2 weeks later, Jake found himself on a transport ship heading back to council space. Maya was with him, as was Kyle. Ben had volunteered to stay and train new fighter pilots. Lisa had agreed to run the combat training program at the academy. The rest of the crew had scattered to various positions across humanity's growing space presence. The transport also carried Earth's first official ambassador to the Galactic Council, a diplomat named Richard Asay, who had spent decades negotiating international treaties. He was sharp, experienced, and unflappable. Jake liked him immediately, so Richard said as they reviewed briefing materials together. Any advice for dealing with 300 alien species? Jake smiled. Be honest. Be direct. Don't back down when you're right, but be willing to compromise when it makes sense. And remember that most of them are more afraid of us than we should be of them. Because we're Deathworlders, Richard said, testing out the term. Because we're survivors, Jake corrected. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day. We learned to adapt, to overcome, to never give up. That's what makes us different. When they arrived at Council headquarters, they found a changed atmosphere. The wary suspicion that had greeted Jake before was gone, replaced with cautious curiosity. Species that had dismissed humanity now wanted to meet with them. Trade negotiations began immediately, but it was a private meeting with Ambassador Velnus that meant the most to Jake. The Kithara had been waiting for him in a quiet garden area of the Station Commander Henderson. Velnus greeted him warmly. It is good to see you again. It's just Jake now, he replied. I'm not commanding the Valiant anymore. But you are commanding humanity's presence here, Velnus observed. That is a greater responsibility. How does it feel? Jake considered this. Terrifying, exciting, important, all at once. Velnus made a sound that might have been laughter. That is how all great changes feel. I wanted to tell you something, Jake. Since the battle, 17 other species have reached out to the Kithara, asking for military training. They want to learn the tactics you taught us. They want to learn how to fight like humans. That's good, Jake said. The more species that can defend themselves, the safer the galaxy becomes. There is more, Velnus continued. A coalition is forming. Species who believe the galaxy needs a more active defense force. Not reactive, waiting for threats to appear, but proactive, seeking out dangers before they can grow. The Kithara, the Dalari, the Lorethian, 6 others. We are calling it the Defense Alliance. Jake felt his pulse quicken. And you want humanity to join. You want humanity to lead it, Velnus corrected. You have something the rest of us lost over millennia of peace. You remember how to fight? How to think strategically? How to make the hard choices that keep people safe? Jake shook his head slowly. That's a lot of trust to place in a species you barely know. We know enough, Velnus said firmly. We know that when the galaxy turned its back on us, you came. We know that you risked everything for strangers. We know that you could have demanded payment or territory or power, but instead, you taught us how to defend ourselves and prepared to leave. That tells us everything we need to know about humanity.